Greetings gamers, today I want to show you the map for my new homebrew setting, the nation of Ashk. In last week's video we spent some time discovering some basic information on Ashk, and today I've taken that information along with some of the pre-existing coastline that I already had and made a map for Ashk. Now this is just a version 1, if you will, just something for me to get a visual representation of the world so that as we are developing it further I can refer back to this and have a sense of the geography of the land. This map was made using Wonderdraft. If you haven't heard of it, it's a new piece of map making software that is awesome. I recently did a review of Wonderdraft, which you can find just up here. I really love this software. It's easy to use, it's intuitive, and it makes, I think, really great looking maps. To make this map, I followed some simple steps. I already had a world map that included the basic outline shape of Ashk, so I imported that into Wonderdraft, which generated the landmass for me, and then I spent a little bit of time just cleaning up those coastlines where things were looking a little bit jagged. Next, I decided to add in the border over on that west and northwest side of the country. I wanted to get that down first because I knew the eventual look I was going for would have no detail on that side of the border, so I didn't want to waste time adding details over there for no reason. To do this, I went onto Google Maps and grabbed a couple of images of different real-world countries. For this example, I used parts of Sweden and France, just so that I had a realistic border that I could follow, so that anyone looking at it wouldn't immediately think that it's just a bunch of straight lines that look really out of place. After I put the border in, I took some time to add some mountain ranges, and to do this, I started out by looking at my existing world map, which has information on plate tectonics, temperature ranges, and all sorts of other information. I'll leave links in the description below to some of the resources I used to create this, but I followed the plate tectonics in that document to place the first really large section of mountains, and then I extended these off into the water to form some islands later on. I then filled in some other mountain areas on the map, and once all of the major mountains were added, it was time to go in and start adding rivers. I started down at the bottom here and focused on the rivers leading into and out of this massive lake. One thing I did at this stage was to add some rivers along the border down on the south part of the country as well as up on the north area. A lot of times borders will form along these natural breaks in the ground because it's easier for factions, nations to hold one side or the other rather than hold a little bit over the river or a little bit over a mountain range. Once I'd got my mountains and rivers in place, I started roughing in general colour. To do this, I used my world map and the resources I mentioned earlier to get an idea of the climate of the country. I knew that the north would be a vast desert, but because of the size of Ashk down at the south end of the country, things get a little more temperate and there's more greenery and forests and vegetation that isn't just limited to following along rivers and lakes. So I coloured in the country and then went through and added some trees. I added forests here and there and added some tree clusters that followed some of the rivers. Once that was done, I added in some extra hills and some grass just to make the wide open areas look a little less barren. And then it was time to move on to placing and naming some cities. The first thing I did was place the current capital of Ashk, which is Azim, which means the Great City. Now I placed this on the Great Lake because I thought that because of the vast access to fresh water, the easy trade hub via the river down to the southern coast, and its proximity to several forests, Azim would be a good place to have our seat of government. Another city I added down on the southern coast is the city of Hadid. And Hadid is the city of spears, and it is renowned as a major slave hub throughout the world. Hadid imports slaves from all over the world and turns them into soldiers. And they have a dedicated legion known as the Hadid Phalanx that is the best of the best that money can buy in terms of slave armies. And then moving a little bit further north, we arrive at the city of Qadim. The city-state of Qadim was once a vastly powerful city-state and probably the capital of the country, but it has since lost a lot of its power, and a lot of that power has moved south to follow the arable land and the slave money. Just above that, we have the city-state of Mahit, which is the city of the dead. This is where the Great Pyramid dedicated to Koros, the goddess of decay, is located, and it's where a lot of the priests of Koros go for their training. It's a massive pyramid upon which there are weekly human sacrifices, and within the city of Mahit is a church that contains thousands and thousands of skeletons and coffins and tombs, and it is where the priests of Koros will deliver death to any worshipper that comes looking for it. And up in the northeast of the country, we have the cities of Hera and Almas. These are two city-states that have fallen to the invading empire from Aparthia. They've come across the ocean and are slowly making their way across Ashk, conquering these city-states and establishing an empire. So what we want to do is we want to put in a border here just to signify that division. So this area here is going to be where this new empire that is forming will be located. So they have already conquered Hera and Almas, and they're slowly pushing westward. The idea for the city of Kabaz came about when I was watching the Great British Bake Off, and there was a story about the Dampfnudel. The city of Frankenfell in Germany is famous because during the 30 Years' War, the citizens were able to stop a Swedish army from invading and pillaging the city by baking over 1,000 of these Dampfnudel loaves. I really loved this story. I thought it was really interesting and added a lot of character to the city, and I wanted to incorporate that in some way. So I came up with the city-state of Kabaz, who, much like Frankenfell, was besieged by an enemy army who was returning from some war, and instead of allowing the enemy army to lay siege to them and decimate the city, they baked thousands and thousands of bread loaves and delivered them to the enemy troops, which discouraged them from attacking, and then the city was saved. So that's just an example of how you can use real world events and real world places to influence some of your homebrew locations. None of my players are likely to know the story of the Dampfnudel, so if they were to come across the city of Kabaz and hear the story of it, it would sound fascinating to them. They would think this is an interesting city with an interesting piece of history, and then they would see that history throughout the city. There would be plenty of these loaves of bread baked throughout the city. It would be one of the mainstays of the city's diet, and it would be baked into the culture of the city. Once I had finished adding all the major city-states that I need to know now, I added in a grid as well as a grid scale. Each of these squares represents 25 miles, and I think that's the best base size because that's about what your party could travel in a day on foot, and it's also really easy to multiply. And then once all the colour and detail had been added, I went through and whited out all the areas that weren't part of Ashk. I did this so that they don't detract from Ashk and don't draw attention from it when you're looking at the map. So when you look at the map, you only see the country of Ashk. You can see that there are areas around it, and I've labelled the neighbouring countries, but the only detail is in Ashk because that is what this map is for. Now this map is nowhere near finished, but using this base version we're going to be able to go in over the coming weeks and really start refining some of the locations, developing them out more, and that might change the geography around some of the city-states. But by having a map before we start getting into all of that nitty-gritty detail and really start diving in on the culture and the setting of Ashk, we have some reference. So we know that Azim and Nahar are on opposite ends of the country, so word will take quite a long time to travel between those two locations, and that might come in handy when we're doing more development work over the coming weeks. I hope you enjoyed this really quick look at the map of Ashk. As I said before, this is made on Wonderdraft, and if you want to see how to make maps on Wonderdraft, check out my tutorial just up there. Next week, we're going to be diving into the gods and the pantheon that are worshipped in Ashk. So if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all the latest videos in this series. But until next time, happy gaming. Thanks for watching. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below for new content every single Friday. And if you want to keep watching, well, there's another couple videos for you to watch just over there. Happy gaming.